Welcome to Mechanical Advantage Garage. I'm Kerry, and today, unfortunately, I do not have any GTO content for you or VW motorcycle content for you. So I thought it might be fun to go through some of the stuff that accumulates with a life of playing with motorcycles and cars. I'm at my parents' house on Long Island again. They're selling their house, they're retired, they don't need it anymore, and so I'm here to help them clean it out a little bit and mostly take my stuff home. I'm going through a lot of stuff, and there's some cool stuff here. And I thought that if you like this channel and you like the stuff that I do, maybe you'd appreciate this stuff the same way that I do. So let's take a look. First up here we have Dad's 1997 Fat Boy, and unfortunately this thing has been on the lift for entirely too much time. It's just been sitting because unfortunately we can't get parts for something really special that's on the other side of the bike, but I'll give you a quick walkthrough, and as I walk through it I'll tell you some of the history of it. So one of the cool things here is this actually does have the Performance Machine 6-piston caliber brakes. If you're gonna ride a fast motorcycle, you do kind of want it to stop. And I know it's a Harley, and there's going to be people rushing to the comments to say, fast motorcycle, what's he talking about? But we'll get to that in a second. So Dad bought this bike brand new in 1997 from Hempstead Harley Davidson. And he was very gracious to let me ride it. And here's something cool. Here's a Pingle petcock that's on it. And actually these tanks aren't the stock tanks, even though they're the stock paint scheme. The actual stock tanks are on the back shelf over there, right here where my finger's pointing. These are 5-gallon Fat Bob tanks. And there's also a aftermarket tachometer on it, which isn't usually standard on the Fat Boy. And floorboards, because why not? Instead of forward controls, these are actually really comfortable. But yeah, Dad bought this bike brand new in 1997 from Hempstead Harley Davidson at a time when you couldn't get them. There was a shortage of them. Here's a nice toolkit for the bike that you can actually, I think there's a lock in here and some other stuff. A lot of this stuff hasn't been looked at in a while. Battery's fully dead. Dyna 2000 digital ignition, which is really cool because you can program those for a specific timing curve, which is, I'll get to why that's there in a second. And yeah, actually a 150 series tire. I don't know if you can see this. It's actually kind of a fat tire. Normally these are 120 or 130 rear tires, and this one is a 150 on the stock Fat Boy rim with a smaller belt right here. It's a much narrower belt. I don't know if you can see it here, than what would normally be stock. But yeah, so he rode this bike around for a while, and then sometime around 1999, it's got a nice rack on the back here too. This is all aftermarket stuff. And it's all safety wired too, because we're thorough. But anyway, he started riding around, and then he started letting me ride it because I had just gotten my motorcycle license and I wanted to get back into riding. I had given up on motorcycle riding because I had moved to Rochester, New York, which snows almost all the time, and so there's no real reason to own a motorcycle there. But yeah, so Python 3 pipes. These are very big pipes. And what had happened, oh, and there's a nice oil gauge right here. But what had happened with this bike is I was riding it one day through this neighborhood, and a woman in a Range Rover pulled out in front of me to make a U-turn. And I had to try and avoid her, I ended up putting the bike on its side and sliding into a curb, which ended up rashing the whole bike, and the curb bent the front fender. So we started to look around for some place to fix it, and all the Harley dealers didn't have time to work on it. So we found this guy, Jimmy Jar, in Bayside, New York, on Francis Lewis Boulevard. And he started to work on the bike, and that's when we started to add more and more parts to it, which eventually led to this. And if you don't know what this is, it is a Roots supercharger. So yes, this is an actual supercharged motorcycle. Long before the Cowie H2. I believe we did this in 1998 or 9. I think I had the accident in 98. Really interesting setup. You can actually see how the drive is here, and this is one of the reasons why the bike's been on the lift for so long, is in here is your cam chest, and here is the drive for the supercharger, which comes off the back of the cam, and then it drives this gear here, which turns the supercharger, which carburetor pulls air in, blows it through, and here is the boost gauge for the supercharger. So it's kind of a neat setup. These are actually kits. They're called magnet chargers, and Jimmy Jar installed it, and he did a fantastic job with it. And after a while, the case here cracked, and it started to weep oil, and then the shaft started to get some run out, and I think it's about 1/8 of an inch run out in it right now. But yeah, supercharged motorcycle. It's pretty cool. I've had some fun on this bike. Dad has too. We put a lot of miles on it. I think he only had a couple thousand miles on it, but I can't see what the mileage is now. But I want to say we've put 15,000 miles on this supercharged. It runs an S&S Super E. That was kind of a trial and error to end up here. Originally, they tell you the setup is for a stock Harley carburetor, and you know, here's the other intake manifold that comes with it, and that you can use the stock Harley carburetor on. And one of the things you find out is those Harley carburetors are CV carbs, constant velocity. And what constant velocity means is it's pulling vacuum in, and that's what operates the throttle slide. It's not actually operated by your hand control. It's your hand control moves a butterfly away from a vacuum port, and that causes the engine to suck more vacuum, and then that lifts the slide and fuels everything. But one of the things about superchargers is they're positive pressure. They're sucking constantly. So CV carbs tend to get really finicky when you put them on supercharged applications. In fact, you're not really supposed to, but they don't tell you that initially. So it ended up with this surge that we ended up chasing through 3 different carburetors before we finally figured out, oh, maybe we shouldn't use the vacuum operated carburetor on the thing that's pulling 3 times the vacuum, right? We ran this supercharger at about 8 pounds of boost. So it would be about a third, 2/3 more horsepower than a stock makes. I think a stock Evo 88 makes about 65, 70 horsepower. So we'd probably be well over 100. I don't think we've ever dynoed it. If we did, I can't find the dyno slips. Notice no front brake on this side. That's why the 6-piston caliper is on the other side, so you can actually get it stopped. But yeah, so this is a really nice setup, and it's a really cool bike, and hopefully by next year it's back on the road once we get the parts back and get them fixed. And maybe we'll document it for the channel. I don't know. Hopefully this isn't the last you see of it. Something else that's cool that I wanted to show you is we've been excavating the father and son project that my dad and I started in about 2010 and had to abandon in 2013 when I moved to Ohio from New York. And it is probably the world's largest model kit. Here, let me show you. Yeah, believe it or not, that's all a motorcycle behind me. This is Dad and I's 1972 Dunstall Norton 810 Mark II. And for those of you who know motorcycles right now, you're going, whoa, that's kind of cool. For those who don't know motorcycles, Paul Dunstall was a tuner, kind of like how Carroll Shelby was a tuner for cars. Like Deanon is a tuner for BMW, right? He would take Norton motorcycles and he would make them into racing motorcycles, starting in the early 60s with the Dunstall Dami Racer, right? And then when the Commando came out, he was a Norton dealer, but he had also managed to get manufacturing status in the UK. So his bikes were actually branded as Dunstalls and not as Nortons. Kind of like how roofs are Porsches bodies, but they're not actually Porsches, they're roofs, you know, RUF. Well, go look up Roof Blackbird, you'll see. Anyway, so the story on this bike is we found it in 2010. It was in a guy's living room. It was his brother's bike. His brother was the original owner of it and had purchased it new in 72. Now, they hadn't actually started importing Dunstalls to the US until 1973. So this was a bike that he actually had to import to the US on his own. And he was a very meticulous guy, and I'll show you, because he raced this thing in AMA and eventually ARMA, and from the time it was new till the time he passed away, I think in 2008. I'm not sure. I'd have to contact the family. But he was a very thorough guy, and these are all the parts that he took apart. And if you notice, they're all labeled with the part number of what they correspond to on the motorcycle. So if I have a parts book, I can put them all together. And there's a ton of them, if you can see on the table here. And he also put everything into boxes, into Tupperware. So just to show you some of the other stuff, this is the original tank, and here's the original seat for it. The seat's kind of worn, but the tank's actually in really good shape, and it still has its Dunstall Power 810. I think he added this stuff here, but he has all sorts of cool decals on it, Cycle News and Motion Performance products. Motion Performance was Baldwin Motion out of Baldwin, Long Island, and they were a Chevy dealer, and Joel Rosen used to build supercars in their dealership, the Motion Performance 427 Corvette and 427 Camaro. Over here we have a second body set. This is a set that actually Dad and I purchased when we started our restoration. Being a Dunstall Mark II, it should have come with a fairing, but this one was actually specified not to have a fairing. And so we found a full Dunstall body set. Here is the fairing, here's the tank. There is another seat for it around here somewhere. There's a lot of spares here. The guy owned a bunch of motorcycles, and he a bunch of Norton motorcycles, and he collected all the parts for them. So there's quite a few pieces. The engine is actually in that black garbage bag there. It's fully assembled and race prepped. It's 810 cc's. A standard Norton would be 750, but as you can see, there's gearbox parts, there's carb parts, there's pistons in here. I don't even know what size those are. It says pistons, rings, and con rods right on the label. Just sorts of, all sorts of crazy stuff. Actually, this is the coolest piece right here in this box. This is the transmission, and this is the numbers matching transmission to the bike. But if you look here, if you're a Norton guy, you'll know what this says right away. That is Quaife Engineering, which means that this is a 5-speed Quaife box. It is not a stock 4-speed Norton transmissions. All Nortons were 4 speeds, but that's a 5-speed. There's a box of 750 transmissions around here too. There's enough here to build a spare bike if we had a spare frame. Unfortunately, I do have a spare frame, which hopefully I'll be covering on the channel once the VW BMW project is done. Here are the Dunstall decibel silencers in 2 different sizes, actually. I have a couple of them here. There should be 4 in that box total, and there's 2 more over there underneath the seats. So there's a lot of stuff. But here's the exhaust pipe for it. So here's the 2 head pipes into a Y pipe, single underneath for clearance, and then out to 2 dual exhaust exits. And these Dunstall pipes actually made decent power, or so I'm told. This is the engine cradle. This is the transmission cradle. This is how the motorcycle got its famous isolastics. They were rubber mounted. So the transmission and swing arm, would mount here, the transmission would mount in here, and then this would be rubber mounted to the chassis to minimize vibration, because Nortons do vibrate. So here's the orange seat for the rest of that body kit. It's in really nice shape. Here's the last bit of treasure from inside the Norton stash. This is a mid-60s, I believe it to be an Atlas engine, might be a 650 SS engine. I don't think it's a 750, but here are the numbers if anyone wants to geek out, being a Norton guy, to look it up. Yeah, you can see there's no crank in it. It's really just an engine case, a set of cylinder barrels, cast iron cylinder barrels, by the way, and the aluminum cylinder head. And if I had a frame for it, maybe I could use it for a bike, but not sure yet. Not sure what I'm going to do with this. I believe this was just racing spares for the previous owner. Like I said, he owned many Norton engines, this just being one of them. So it's got a nice stand. I may actually just sandblast this and clean it up and put it in my house on display, you know, polish it and make it look nice, because it is so cool. Yeah, so that's it. And speaking of sandblasting, by the way, this is coming home with me as well. This is the Eastwood blasting cabinet that my father and I used for years. We got this, I think, in the the late 90s, early 2000s. It can hold two full-size 17-inch rims inside for blasting. It's full of media right now, and yeah, it's coming to my home shop so I can get stuff cleaned and blasted. Over here in the corner, you'll see there's another GTO hood, GTO trunk, some old E30 parts from my BMW days. I had a 91 E30 convertible that was a lot of fun. So there's a hood and a fender. I do love all the old stickers on Dad's toolbox. Dad was heavily involved with the Experimental Aircraft Association, so there's a lot of aviation stickers on it, but just thought I'd show you that. Bench grinder and drill press are coming back with me as well, as the chop saw. Not sure what to do about the oxy setup yet, but the compressor to power everything, that's coming as well. So yeah. Well, here's something else that I found that while we were cleaning up. This is the dual gate out of a 67 GTO, and what's nice is this one's out of the car, so I can actually show you how it works. Now, if you remember some of my other videos in the GTO, I demonstrated how the dual gate works with the sort of the neutral and the left side versus the right side. The left side just being a normal automatic transmission, the right side being a ratcheting shift transmission. So here's the lockout for it, but if we take this plate off, what you can see here is right here. Let me see if you can see that. Right, this piece right here, that is the detent for the ratcheting shifter. So when you go all the way over and you begin to shift, you have to push this against the right side of the housing, and it will lock into place and it won't let you move forward. And then same thing with the next gear, right? So there's actually a detent peg on the stick, and there are the detents that it fits into. And that's all how it works. Otherwise, it's just a regular automatic shifter. But Hurst sold a ton of these well into the 90s for all cars, but they were factory equipment only on the 67 and 68 GTO. Here's some more garage treasure for you. This time, GTO treasure. This is the original Rochester quadrajet main body for my 1967 GTO, and this is actually the correct 1967 GTO quadrajet. And it's not numbers matching because there are no serial numbers on this, but it is numbers correct, and I happen to know this is actually the original one from this car. Most people have actually never seen the insides of a quadrajet to know why they're so special, or why they're so hated, depending on what camp you fall in. But this is really the big part here. These are the primaries where my thumb is. And when you're driving around town, this is what you're primarily driving off of, the main fuel circuit. And you can see it has two Venturi boosters in it and is a very, very small primary, right? Actually gets really good fuel economy. This is one of the things that quadrajets were known for, is that they got really good around town fuel economy as long as you didn't put your foot in it. Now here are the giant secondaries, and yes, this is the full size of the port when the throttle blade is open. There is nothing else that goes in here besides the throttle plate that bolts onto it at the top. Now these are vacuum secondary operated, so when you put your foot in it and the primary is open all the way, and there would be a primary plate at the bottom here where my finger is wiggling, when that opens all the way, it creates enough vacuum to suck these open, and then you get a huge fuel charge. on the order of about 700 CFM, six or 700 CFM. Pretty big carburetor. But then again, these were on big blocks. They were on 396 and 427 Chevrolets, as well as 400 and 455 Pontiacs, and 400 and 455 Oldsmobiles, and 401s, 400, 455 Buicks. So they were good carburetors. What makes Pontiac ones unique is that their center fuel feed right here, and this is the reason why this one's not on the car. Besides the one being on the car is actually from a 69 GTO Judge Ram Air car. If you can see in here, the threads are not in the greatest of shape. They're actually kind of munged up, and that's because, you know, 19-year-old me cross-threaded this when he was putting it together, and then had to go searching for a carburetor to rebuild it. So that's why this has been sitting on Dad's shelf in his garage forever. Here we see some more casting numbers, made in the USA, and I think here's the serial number for the carburetor. What it doesn't have is on this side there would be a blue dot for the later carburetors. This does not have it. This is the 1967 quadrajet. So yeah, just interesting garage find. This is the truck that we've filled up so far. It's a 20-foot truck, and it's, you know, only about half full at this point. Mostly GTO parts, as you can see, some old BMW stuff that I'm going to give away. But I did get myself a drill press, a bench grinder, a 60-gallon compressor, and a sandblasting cabinet that Dad no longer has a use for. But just in case you think I'm taking everything and I'm saving a lot, there's also this giant dumpster. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here. Old bowling balls and house stuff, but you know, doors and stuff. And you know, here's a Jeep D30 front axle. There's some original Jeep shocks. I don't know if you can see it right here, is a 1968 Super Turbine 300 transmission out of an overhead cam 6 Pontiac Tempest that I used to own. Some GTO drum brakes. I just don't have time to take it to the metal recycler. A compressor that still works, but the tank has so many holes in it, it won't hold any air. Here's some old GTO A-arms. These are off parts cars. They're not actually off my original car. Here's a trophy that used to belong to Dad. You know what? I'm just going to go ahead and take the top off of this, because I think that'll make an awesome hood ornament. This is probably from his go-kart racing days in the 50s. Might be a drag trophy, I don't know. But yeah, I'm taking this. Now everything's loaded up in the truck, and I'm actually in the truck driving out of New York, heading back to Ohio with everything. So I hope you have enjoyed just my little bit of automotive and motorcycle archaeology. Comes from a life, or I should say a misspent youth, of collecting motorcycles and doing hot rod stuff, and just generally trying to have fun with motorized vehicles. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed you know, watching me go through this, go through the garage and sort of dig out stuff and pack things away, and hopefully some of it will end up as future content. If you're interested in it, let me know in the comments, and as always, like and subscribe. Thanks, and have a good one.